and Robert Vaughn. Oh, good. Lots of good people.
Lots of good people, lots of good stuff. And here we are on lots good evening. Welcome everyone to the spoiler room. Yes, it is another Over the Hill special that we have going on today, celebrating films that turned 50 like myself this year. And today, since it is Skate or Die month, we are looking at 1975's Rollerball. Uh, last week we looked at Solar Babies, which Ian unfortunately missed. He missed that one. Or fortunately, he might if he ever does watch it. But Ian was with us tonight, my man who keeps coming back for more. How you doing, Ian?
I'm doing great. I'm ready to. I'm sorry I missed last week. I was out of town, but I'm ready to talk about this movie, which is a first-time watch for me. I'm able to check this off my list. I'm excited to talk about it.
Exciting. And we're also excited as well. He always classes up the place when he shows up, and I do mean that sincerely. It is from the establishingshot.org, Mr. Jeff York. How you doing, Jeff?
Very good. Nice to be with two of my favorite gentlemen on the planet.
Oh, well, thank you. That warms our heart. And it's not the only thing that warms. No. Anyway.
Or should I say Mark K. and Ian S.?
Oh, there you go. Ian S., Mark K., Jeff Y. Yeah. And we'll be joined by Joe R. at some point tonight as well later on. But yes, 1978's Rollerball. We're
75.
75, excuse me. 1975 Rollerball. Thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair and popping your favorite beverages. We're talking movie spoilers. So, Mr. Jeff York.
Yes, sir.
You always do these so well.
Oh, you're very kind.
If you could, please, give us a synopsis of 1975's Rollerball.
Certainly. Well, as was the wont of many filmmakers at that time, particularly in the genre of science fiction, they used to like to showcase visions of the future, not always positive, mostly fairly negative, dare I say, dystopian. That is true here. We are in a future that is a very strange world now. While there is this supposed good attributes about it, that they've eliminated war and hunger and famine and some of those kind of terrible things, it has unfortunately become a sort of corporate run world rather than countries. It's companies, which I always wonder when I watch this, is that what inspired Patty Chayefsky to do the Ned Beatty speech the next year in Network, where he says, there are no countries, there are no, just there's AT&T, Dell, DuPont, and all those things. But anyway, so they have these corporations which own the world now, and they're sort of the new countries. And the way that they sort of provide entertainment for the masses, very much in the sort of sense of the world of gladiators in Rome, is they provide this sport, which is a blood sport for everybody to watch and get excited about, because we don't have any wars anymore, but we have this sport that is very vicious, and I think would probably be best described as a combination of football, roller derby, and maybe like motorcycle off-course racing. Though I don't know why they've got motorcycles in this fairly tight, oh, wait a minute, that's a roller derby track, and now we've just got motorcycles on the inside track. But this is what is there to sort of provide the circuses for the masses. And within this, each of the corporations, energy, food, different companies that sort of rule the world, they each have a team. And so their teams are sort of there to provide not only entertainment, to sort of show their prowess and in some respects, their superiority in this kind of waging war, as it were. And the one character who's the main person was played by James Caan at sort of the height of his popularity. He was getting a lot of these kind of roles. He plays Jonathan E., who is the star player for the Houston team, which is the capital of the Energy Corporation. A little on the nose right there, I dare say. And he's becoming a little bit too big for the game, and that strikes his corporate overlords, including the head guy of the Energy Corporation, Mr. John Houseman, playing another of his villains in it. Doesn't strike him as tenable. So there's kind of a whole thing about how do they get this player who's seeming to get more and more individual power and celebrity to sort of acquiesce to this company mindset, and what do they have to do to sort of keep him from getting too powerful?
Yeah,
How was that? Was that pretty good?
That's good.
A lot to explain, because you got to explain why this whole thing
Yeah.
exists anyhow.
Yeah. No, that's
terrible future.
that's a good explanation for
if
it.
he was
No,
10 years younger, Chuck Heston would have been playing this role. Like, damn it, this metal ball is heavy. But
I could see Charlton Heston in the role.
Easily. This
would
a
be
bunch of these kind of movies, starting with Planet of the Apes and the Omega Man, and all different kinds of Soylent Green. I mean, this is very much in that Soylent Green, even Logan's Run kind of, where they were doing all these
Logan's Run. This definitely has
about our society and people.
This definitely has a Logan's Run type of vibe to it as well. Absolutely.
And I'll just say one big thing about it, because we'll get into this later, but the director of this was maybe one of the hottest directors at the time. My God, it's Norman Jewison, which, he'd done a number of things, but he was the kind of go-to guy for edgy kind of controversial films. He did In the Heat of the Night, and then he did Jesus Christ Superstar, and they said, we like that musical so much, we're going to give you Fiddler on the Roof as well. But then he did some things like this, which were considered to be a little bit controversial at the time. But this was one of his big movies from the 70s.
Indeed it is. And an interesting film in general, because next week we'll be looking at the remake they decided to do like 30 years later. Not
we
quite.
really have to.
We could almost dismiss it here in about a 3-minute segment.
We will be hey, damn it, we're talking. It's on the schedule. We're talking about it. I made a thumbnail and everything. We're talking about.
Just have to watch it.
I can't wait to watch that movie, because this is the first time watching the 75 version. I never saw the remake. Mm-hmm. And watching this movie, I thought it would be amazing to see this movie remade. And then I remembered, they did with Chris Klein.
There's a good director, though, who did not show his directorial prowess in it. That was John McTiernan.
Right, Die Hard. John
Die Hard and Predator. Like, wait a minute, you did that one?
It's gonna be
before or after the prison sentence.
It's gonna be an
interesting. You got to get this done before I go do my jail time for threatening my wife with murder.
Yes.
Well, that put him in movie jail anyway, so it's
put him in movie jail.
So.
No one's in movie jail here, though. Some people may feel someone should have been put in movie jail for this film. This is the Rollerball 75 is kind of a cult film in that it didn't seem to do that great, but it still lived on. People see reference in that, because if you look at the themes and such, it's very interesting. Watching this, it's been a long time since I watched it, but we've got I think at least one or two first-time viewers here, so I want to get their high-level feelings first on it. Ian, you said this was your first time watching it. You get to check it off your bucket list. What'd you think of Rollerball? The high-level feeling on this?
I really loved it. It's weird because I just watched it today in a couple of sittings amidst a whole bunch of other stuff that was going on. But I was able to still absorb it. I was very surprised by it. I thought it could use a remake only in that I appreciated the stuff happening outside the rollerball arena more than I did the inside the rollerball arena until the climax, which I think was great. But I just feel like if this were in the hands of like a Joseph Kosinski, you could make a really amazing, kinetic, violent, entertaining film that retains all the same themes, but just modernizes it, because it's futuristic. It's 1975. They're working with what they had, so it's not nearly as great as something they can accomplish today. However, I love the story. I love James Caan. Although, and we'll get to this, I hate the way this movie ended, because I felt like it was going in a very specific direction. At the very last second, the filmmakers or the studio said, we can't let audiences leave the theater wanting to cut their wrists. So we're going to give them some hope. And I'm like, no, this movie does not deserve hope. But
can I build on that for just a second?
Sure.
And again, I don't want to take away from you. Welcome, Joe R.
Joe R.
Sorry, I was late.
No worries.
because I just want to quickly say, even though I just explained all, but I'm going to just sort of basically say what Ian did is I saw this when I was in sixth grade, I think it was sixth or seventh grade.
Wow.
In the theaters. And I mean, for me, it was like, wow. I mean, but this was a lot like Westworld and some of those kind of things where, and to your point, Ian, and this is funny, I think the reason that Soylent Green and Westworld and a lot of those kind of movies work is they didn't end happy. They ended pretty dark, even going back to Planet of the Apes, where he realizes he's back home. I think when you do dystopia and you do the bad future, you kind of have to leave with like, oh, there's the lesson for us all. It's very Rod Serling-ish. But to your point, I think this film, you can see it's got this weird vibe to it, which is really interesting and kind of holds up even after all these decades. But, you want them to world build just a little more time and money to do some of these things, which I think to your point, a remake could do, particularly making that Rollerball. Like, it was done pretty well. I mean, I remember at the time I was thinking that was pretty damn good action, and this weird made up sport that they had to sort of make us understand and stuff. Very violent, really well edited and scored and stuff. But yeah, it was, I think one of the reasons it doesn't maybe have quite as much cachet today as, say, like Westworld did, which, spawned even an HBO series, is because it does end a little bit nice. And it would have been better if, if we're going to have corporations, you don't beat the corporation, at least,
Well, it's also because, again, it feels like that last 20 minutes, even before the big finale fight or the match, it is leading our character, and we'll get into the whole, like, everything leading up to that. But there's a very specific point where he goes on a downward spiral. And he is almost like accepting, like, I am alone in this world. And it's ironic because I'm also the most popular guy on the planet. People love me, but I am completely without, compatriots. And this is my last go round. And then it's like, oh no, maybe there could be a revolution. I'm like, no, this is not this movie that it felt tacked on. I was gobsmacked at that last series of freeze frames.
By the way, a movie I kept thinking of when I was watching this, it reminded me of in sort of this weird tone and sort of vibe. I know that's such a popular word today, but movies in the 70s had vibes too. It reminded me a lot of The Parallax View. Like, here's this individual person who's kind of up against this mammoth machine that he doesn't even know how deep it goes and everything else. And, that's kind of about this individual reporter. Can he make a difference? This is about an individual versus the big part of the state. But it's creepy and weird a lot like that. And even when they sort of present, some of the stuff that he's going through and the mind games they played with Warren Beatty's character here, the mind games they play, his ex-wife comes back. I mean, that's just creepy shit stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is. There's a nice underlying creepy vibe with this entire film. Joe, what about you? How do you feel about Rollerball?
It was a first-time viewing for me too. I've actually not seen any of the movies that we're doing this month before, so I know already. I've seen Donald G. Jackson movies, so I know this is going to be the peak. I've seen other movies he's made. I love the idea of the individual up against this massive corporation and the theme of the death of individuality. I guess my question to Ian is, if we were to remake it, what would the themes be now? Because this stuff's all at our door now.
Well, I mean, that's the kind of the perfect thing about this movie. And it's weird because I don't think you change anything. But it's also, you could fall into that trap of like, I go to the movies to escape the headlines. This is just, I mean, there are moments in Houseman's performance, particularly early on when he's talking to the team, where it is, I mean, Donald Trump. I mean, down to there. Hold on, there's a line I'm going to bring up in my phone that he said, "This is a great team, great city, great stuff out there tonight."
Yes,
and then he just I'm like that. I feel like I've heard the president say that at some point.
Well, it's not even that. It's his cadence. Everything about it is cadence when
and
he's
the way he moves and walks.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's eerie. Yeah.
And even they're in suits. They didn't do like the world building is, some of it's done very well. And I love the Rollerball uniforms and the typeface and the fonts of the numbers and stuff. That's very cool. But like, it's so on the nose because the corporate guys in the audience are just wearing these expensive suits and ties. They didn't try to make them look too different. But even more so, to your point, Ian, because like that's Roger Goodell and all those people who show up at these locker rooms for these, to share a piece of the celebration, including senators or celebrities or presidents. And being in a suit like Houseman is makes him seem all the more like one of those guys.
Well, and here's the thing. Going back to your point, Joe, I would love to see a remake just for the filmmaking sensibility of it. I mean, literally keep the same screenplay, and just except for that ending, I think I'd switch it up. But just some modern filmmaking and what you can do with like the sports movie. And like I said, Joseph Kosinski would be perfect for something like this. But the weird thing is, this movie is a half century old. And I feel like a lot of movies like these kind of paranoid thrillers from the 70s and even into the 80s, like with the Terminator, I feel like people took all the wrong lessons from them. These are supposed to be warnings. And yet a lot of people use them, either they use them as blueprints on how to build the future, the dystopian future, or they cottoned onto something that was already in progress half a century ago and like, this is coming. We're not going to escape it. I mean, when you look at Zero, the master computer from this is AI. It consumes everything. People put the world's knowledge into this computer. They transcribe books and they destroy the books, and the parts they don't like, they edit out. And if you want to read the actual material, you have to go to this bunker in Geneva and get in somehow and hope that they didn't, quote unquote, lose the 13th century.
Yeah, that was more horrifying to me than anything. Was when Sir Ralph Richardson's just like, oh well, there goes the 13th century.
That's what's funny about this film. Yeah. That's what I like about some of these 70s films that didn't have the huge budget, so they couldn't quite do the world building that you would hope. But at the same time, the glimpses they give you into the world that your characters live in is freaking scary. And the 01, being a tech guy alone, but just in general, that whole thing, because folks, our guy, Jonathan E., as he starts to getting pressure to retire, because his star popularity is so big, the corporations are like, everybody's glomming onto him, and the other corporations are losing out on money from merchandising or whatever. They don't say it, but it's kind of implied. You're like, this one guy is getting more power than all the corporations. We can't have that because they aren't going to be buying from us. They're going to be buying his merch or whatever. So, but he is wondering about this hole in their history, because they talk about the corporate wars. It's been mentioned that there was wars once the governments dissolved and corporations took over countries. There were corporate wars, but nobody seemed to have information or were volunteering. So he goes to Geneva to this computer place where they transcribe the books. And as my wonderful panel here mentioned, he's talking to the one guy who's in charge of this entire archiving of the history of everybody's books, like globally, just Geneva, just this one place. He's in charge of it. And that scared the hell out of me, one, having it in place, but just the conversation they have about losing the information, losing all of the history for the 13th century is just gone. The books are gone. And now that file is gone. And then they were talking about revising the history. That's scary, because even it's supposed to be in 2018. This film takes place in 2018, all right? Even though it was made in 75, it's supposed to be 2018. But the things they were talking about, I'm like, I've read articles just last week about people concerned about the changing of official documents, and we've even seen it in real time on certain websites, deleting sections of historical documents to suit people's needs. And if you don't have a physical copy or backup, that's all you have now. And that whole sequence with Zero and now wanting to answer the question because it involved the corporation and missing information, that whole thing was horrifying.
Yeah.
Well, it's also, I mean, it's a bit of a twist because that concept had been around at least since, Orwell's 1984, if not, earlier. Right. But the conceit was always that it was the government or this giant kind of governing body controlling the information and controlling what people, could see and hear. Here it's kind of started out as that, but the scientist, the archivist says they put all this stuff into the computer, but then the computer spits it out. You can ask it anything and it will give you an answer, but it might not be correct. It's kind of gone insane. And look where we're at now with Chat GPT and AI. There's all these stories coming out now about people asking it questions and it'll spit out a wrong answer. But if the person has a bead on what a correct answer might be, it will ask a follow-up question. AI will then correct itself and say essentially, oh, I forgot to bring up those other factors. But if you stop at step one, like, what is that? And eventually it's dead internet theory all over the place. It's like there's no new information. It's all recycled nonsense and humanity just goes down the drain. And again, this is a half century ago.
Yeah. I mean,
in a science fiction, adventure movie.
We've seen it recently with court cases where a lawyer will use an AI for a case, and the judge will be like, "You're referencing something here that never happened."
Right, fake cases. The AI made up
precedent that never took place. So the AI is just hallucinating things.
Right. Well, it was prompted to build a case based on precedent, and it essentially couldn't. Right, so it made up cases.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not just vital statistics and information and news that's really important to get the story straight on. It's lots of incidental stuff that you would think would be low-hanging fruit. Like, I don't know how much you guys have noticed this, but Facebook is filled with all these AI bots that are saying, like, Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum was a star and blah, blah, blah. Like, they're trying to do a little bit of almost history for the young'uns who are on the thing, but then they'll get information wrong, or they won't have the right picture, or they'll have AI do some version of it, and it doesn't look like Robert Mitchum because they've done a shitty job of doing the illustration, and they'll miss vital parts about it, or things that are much more interesting, or sort of the key highlights of his biography. And to your points that you were just all making, it's like, well, maybe that's the first pass and it hasn't been edited by somebody who probably need to oversee it. But this stuff is showing up all the time now on my feed. And I'll give you one that's a funny example. I'm a big Natalie Wood fan. She's one of my favorite actresses. And so there's this Natalie Wood appreciation page or whatever. And they sometimes show pictures of her and get the stories right about her. Clearly, they've read the biographies or know the Wikipedia page. And then other times they'll put up pictures that's like, that is not Natalie Wood. I don't know where you got that picture from. And these are supposed to be the people who love her. So it's like, what is going on, Mr. Zuckerberg? Do tell, because I don't understand how this stuff is getting to be so part and parcel of.
And the problem is greed. The problem is they don't want to pay somebody to fact check it.
That's right. They don't want to pay somebody to do the right job.
And I know we are talking about Rollerball from 75.
I mean, we really are, because these are themes raised in the movie.
That's right.
Yeah, go ahead, Ian.
Oh no, but real quick, greed is one part of it, Joe. But the other part that I think the movie is getting to is it poses a great question, and it's sort of the question that the Matrix would tackle, 35 years later,
25, 20 years, 20 years later.
20 years,
is, if you are given paradise and you don't know any better, then what's the problem? Because in this future, everyone has it really good. All their needs are provided for. All they have to do is essentially not ask questions, especially when they're asked really horrible things. Like our E character, what is it? Joseph? Jonathan. Yeah, sorry. I keep wanting to call him Joe. Probably because Joe's here. But Jonathan, yes. Jonathan E was married until one of the executives from one of these corporations came along and said, "Hey, I'd like your wife."
Yeah.
And all of a sudden his wife is no longer his wife, and she goes off with someone else. And it's like, that's really crappy. The trade-off is he's still an international celebrity and he's got all of his needs taken care of and he wants for nothing. But it's a question of
giving them women, apparently.
Yeah, they just get assignments. They're literally called assignments. It's like,
they're all consolation prizes, and you get the idea that everybody who is even down to like the lowest strata, quote unquote, lowest strata of society is still living a comfortable life. All they have to do is not ask questions, to the point where they can get rid of books and all this information and have incorrect information floating around because nobody cares. They don't ask these questions.
I was like, why do you want to read a book?
Right.
Yeah.
Why would you need to? And I've already already run into that because I was working full time in a bar, and I got a screenwriting job last year. And I remember one of the guys asking, "Why'd they hire you? Why don't they just get an AI to do it?" Or when I was doing the thing earlier this year at University of Illinois, I remember one of the guys at the bar going, "Well, you just have an AI write your speech." I'm like, why would I do that? Why would I want an AI to write a speech about my experiences? Like, I don't understand that. So it's laziness that's now become part of it. Because as long as we have all this technology to do the thing for us, then I don't have to do it. I don't have to be bothered.
Well, and then that's a form of control by the corporations, which we see in this film later on, is that they're controlling the players and the basically the population at large. Because you've got it really great, you got it, Dick. But if they don't want you to have that, you can either go along with, okay, fine, like, Jonathan E. did and said, yeah, okay, fine, I don't have a wife anymore because the corporation said so. Or you could resist, and when you resist, you start causing trouble, and you start having 2 military guys following you everywhere. This film, I've got to admit, they cover some heavy topics, and James Caan actually does it really well with the Jonathan E. character, because we don't get like huge monologues, but if you're paying attention to body language and just the way they're talking to each other and inferences and innuendos and influence, there's a lot going on underneath the surface of some of these conversations. Like when he's being videotaped for his retirement speech, which he never doesn't actually give. He's with his current assignment, and she's interviewing him. And at one point, he just pulls out a drug because she asks, "Hey, you got anything?" He's like, "Oh yeah, here." She takes it, and she starts feeling real woozy. He's like, "You're feeling woozy?" He's like, "Yeah, maybe you shouldn't just take stuff from It's like you're just too trusting, and the guy behind the counter, behind the screen, which he can't see, is trying to direct him, and he's like, well, why do I need to read the script? He's starting to come to the realization, but not in like a grandiose, like, I'm taking a stand against a company, but you can see it. He's becoming that individual. The way James Caan plays this, you see that individuality, and he's starting to see just how much is wrong with the world.
Yeah. And, I like that he's not an idiot. I mean,
no,
he's a pretty smart guy. He is a kind of a brawler, rollerball, guy, killing people. He's had the record number of kills and injuries and all this stuff, but he's not a lunkhead. He's a very interesting character. And I mean, that's the thing, is like, as far as his journey, that's the other thing. You mentioned the things going on around him and the characters going on around him. I had a lot of questions until I got to the last part of this film. For example, he's got the one guy played by, was it Moses Gunn?
Yeah, Moses Gunn, Cletus.
Who's like he's like his trainer. And he says, "Can you do some sniffing around for me? I've got some suspicious things are going on. I'd like you to investigate." He's allowed to do it. He's allowed to kind of snoop around parties and go digging and relay information. Jonathan E. is allowed to go to Geneva and visit this vault, where they keep all the books. I'm thinking, if this is an all-powerful corporation they're concerned about this kind of like threat of individualism, why? And they've got surveillance everywhere. You've got to imagine, why are these things allowed to happen? And it can only be allowed to happen if they are sure that they've got all the angles covered. And he can go off and have these little adventures and do all of his investigating and stuff. They're still going to, squash him like an ant in the end, which is why I think the last, 30 seconds of this movie are a giant cheat. Because otherwise it's like, no, really, what was all that about? They're idiots.
Well, to your point, Ian, one of the things that I think is fascinating about this film, as well as a number of movies that were made during that time period, is they did not have the big special effects or production design budgets to show us how we got here. But it's kind of fascinating that they leave that for us to determine, or maybe envision in our heads with just whatever information they give to us. And again, Ian, I like the fact that they don't necessarily explain everything in those 3 or 4 title cards up front where, they've done recently that we have not liked and objected to. Instead, some of this is, sort of fed to us as we go through the story and we find out about it. And I love the fact that we're then, I think, all the more in sort of the position of the hero, where we aren't finding stuff any faster than he did, and some of the stuff they don't know about, or we don't know how the world came to this exactly. I always found that fascinating in Westworld, where suddenly they're just on this plane, and they're going to this rich person's theme park, but all we get a sense of like where we are in the future is, man, that plane is traveling super fast over the desert there, right? And it's just a little thing. Okay, this is the future. It's kind of still the privileged class and stuff, but we don't exactly know all the pieces and how they got there, which I think makes these things all the more mysterious to us as well, and maybe a little bit more intimidating, because when this stuff happens, I mean, the closest you get to sort of understanding it and relatable is like the rich people are still kind of living in a vaulted 1% world where they can go out and shoot trees,
with these exploding guns.
Yes, guns, I mean, wasn't that? I thought that was a very chilling scene. They're laughing and howling like they're shooting off water pistols or something at a summer party, but it's hoity-toity and ball gowns and lethal weapons. But I love the fact that a lot of this is left for us to sort of infer or maybe wonder ourselves, and I think it keeps us a little bit discombobulated, which is again how a lot of times these heroes, whether it's Richard Benjamin in Westworld, Charlton Heston in Planet of the Apes, or James Caan here, connects us a little bit more because they're a little discombobulated too. They lived this, but they don't know what's going on entirely either. So I think it's very good for audience identification.
Yeah.
I think we can kind of ascertain what happened based on the little nuggets that were given, like when they talk about the corporate wars that we're not going to speak of, and or that we know nothing about, and the history seems to have disappeared. Right. I think we can kind of figure out what's been going on.
Like they don't do the flashbacks, and they show you those scenes like their newsreel footage or something,
Well, but it's also interesting because usually when you talk about a dystopian future, I mean, you think about Star Trek or something, where there's a history of when they talk about wars, they're talking about like nuclear wars, like, oh, we blew ourselves up and then fought our way back and then we started exploring the stars. You almost get the idea that the corporate wars were, Pepsi did a hostile takeover of Coca-Cola and then got absorbed by Unilever and all this other stuff. It's kind of like we were talking earlier in the pre-show about Jason X. There's that line in there. You don't even this reminds me of the Microsoft wars back in the early 2000s. That kind of thing. Just this kind of, but it works, especially now a half century later with what we know about this kind of like corporate cultural indoctrination. It kind of creeps up on you. And then before enough people can say, hey, wait a second, we've got ChatGPT. We go from, 2 years ago, AI art is so hilarious because they can't come up with a character who doesn't have, less than 6 fingers on one hand, to videos that are indistinguishable from actual people. Mm-hmm. And the technology is evolving to the point where, this podcast, a year from now, we won't even know if we did this show. It's gradual and then all at once, and it's easy to get stuff along. And that's one of the messages of this movie. And that's one of the reasons I love it.
Well, and let's look at the fact too, that we see through Bartholomew played John, Huseman, who we talked about last weekend on your show for Naked Gun.
Naked Gun.
I found that hilarious. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot he was in this. So, and here he is playing the corporation, and they, Jonathan E., his popularity is what keeps him alive throughout this film until that last game when they figured, we can, eliminate him in the last game. But up until then, he's pulling some things that they're like, yeah, he's still a star. We can't really just take him out. They try every other thing, but you get that voting where, Bartholomew's with the other panel of what you assume are the leaders of the other corporations that you basically have the Illuminati in this room of sorts, in that you have this group of corporation leaders that are now making decisions for the entire world or for a specific player. And I thought that was just interesting. And what was even more interesting is the way they voted, because Bartholomew was saying, we created Rollerball, this game, so that it was, the team spirit, the team effort, not one guy can be winning. But shit, Jonathan E.'s like, freaking Brady, for crying out loud. He's like winning everything no matter what we do. And he's getting more popular. And we really need to kind of just destroy him. And they vote But the way they voted was interesting because none of them spoke. They all press a button that only, I'm assuming, Bartholomew could see, people voting on, the agreement of basically destroying Jonathan E's life. And I just thought that whole little sequence, and it was like, this film starts off with this wonderful yet extended sequence for you to get the exact idea of what rollerball is. Because you see practically an entire rollerball game, with Houston versus Madrid. And it's very well edited, and it's exciting and it's interesting. But then we get this quiet moment with all the leaders. And I love that because this film is like this mixture of sports ball type story and like this corporate, like, this kind of just dystopian darkness. And I'm like, this is an interesting film. I mean, I didn't know, you're watching it going, where are we going next with this story?
Right. I mean, first of all, that opening, was that the Phantom of the Opera music?
No, that was the Toccata Fugue in D minor or whatever. It's I think it's called.
Okay.
It generally is kind of regarded as like the scary movie music.
That's the scary music like classical piece.
Like, welcome to Count Dracula.
That's the one thing. Yeah, I recognize the it's a very popular piece, but I still don't. It opens and it closes the movie, and I still don't know why. But I will say, visually, you mentioned it's Houston versus Madrid. On the scoreboard, it's HOU and then MAD, which, if you just read it out loud, says "How mad." Yeah, which is kind of like the state of the world that we're about to watch. And I just love that everything in this movie has been thought down to the nines. Jeff, you mentioned the font, unlike the jerseys, but it's also the font of all of Rollerball, but it's the font of the entire world. Yeah. When they go into the hospital, the elevators, the wings are all in that font. It's like everything is one unified, Mark, to your point, team kind of vision, and nothing's going to stray from that. And it's just like, one of the reasons I think this should be remade today is so you can take someone and show modern audiences what it's like to have a filmmaker with a singular vision and really think things through thematically, visually, and not have to include a whole bunch of. Are there any jokes in this movie? I don't recall. But
no, I mean, Moon Pie adds lighter notes. He's sure. A little bit of the lighter character, but I think Moon Pie as well is more of the representation of the general populace in this. And Jonathan E is the individual. But Moon Pie is still the devoted. He's the loyal, but he's not loyal to the corporation. He's loyal to his buddy Jonathan E. But at the same time, his attitudes and everything, I think, are supposed to represent maybe the mass populace. Moon Pie, because we spend outside of Jonathan, he's probably one of the players we spend the most time with, and just an interesting character in that. And this is probably me making the mountain out of a puddle, but that font is also very similar to a calculator number font of the old school calculators. And everything's in that font. And I'm like, maybe it's just my brain working, but I'm like, there's a calculator font called that's look exactly like that, making everybody a number in a calculator.
No, that font was used for all kinds of stuff, from space movies to the TV show Search. Do you remember that with Hugh O'Brien and Tony Franciosa as spies with the electric chip in their thing? And the Search was written with that computer output sort of font. And this is a vamp of that, definitely. Yeah. But it's its own thing. But I loved your pointing. It's like, okay, we've all decided on this one font, right? Talk about corporate overthink. Like that's where the company's standing on this font. To your question about the humor in it, I would argue that the sport itself has moments of humor, albeit maybe black humor. But I think the combination of, the roller derby, which is this ridiculous, very fakey sport from that era, along with, the heavy, more and more presence of football in the world and how that was becoming America's pastime. The combination of that, some of that I think was kind of funny. But it's also violent and awful too. But some of that I think is where there is humor. Like they're satirizing those sports a little bit.
Sure, but I guess the point is, I'm sorry, I keep thinking about movies like Superman and like weapons. If this were made by the same people who made those films, they'd be like, "Isn't this sport stupid? What am I supposed to do with this ball?" You know, it might be ridiculous kind of thematically, or it's football, but it's roller derby. But the people who are playing that game understand that their lives are at stake. It might be funny out in the crowd, but that crowd's not on the track.
That's exactly right. And that's what I think is so interesting about it is you can see they're doing a little bit of a parody of this, a little bit, but when you put it all together and you show them playing it, it's serious, deadly stuff.
Yeah. They don't even do like, Bad News Bears or Slapshot or any of that stuff where there's funny stuff happening on the ice, so to speak. No, it's once that ball starts shooting out, it's like a giant roulette wheel. They're all scrambling for their lives.
And it'll blow up a motorcycle. It will do a lot of damage.
Well, it shoots out at 120 miles an hour, and I guess it did actually shoot out pretty quick. That thing was shot out pneumatically for the movie. Apparently,
so that wasn't like a miniature or something. They actually built a full scale.
Yeah, in fact, because they built this in an Olympic arena in Germany. There was an Olympic I think basketball or sports arena that they built this track in, and apparently everybody enjoyed the game so much. The crew in that played the game when the cameras were off in their downtime. They played a similar version of the game in their downtime.
How about the fact that you get a big star like James Caan at that era, who is doing most of his own stunts in that? That's him skating around. They don't have his face obscured. They've got the helmet on, but that's his face. And they're not putting that in there. And just thinking about going 20 times around on a track on roller skates, and it's, pretty much conventional roller skates. I don't know what the insurance was on this film, but it's pretty impressive.
And he's got that unmistakable Jimmy Caan from the 70s physicality where he looked like a leatherhead. He just got that footballer, old school footballer build. It's just wonderful.
Brian Piccolo before he got sick.
And the stunt work in this is amazing, by the way.
Actually, this is the first film to give credit to the actual stunt workers because they appreciated them so much. It's the first film that actually lists stunt workers,
and they absolutely deserve it because, like, just the opening minutes alone, watching this, I was just like, just watching it, just like, oh my god, what are they doing? These poor stuntmen must have gone through hell.
Did you notice one of the stuntmen names on that list was Dick Warlock?
Oh, was he one of them? That's great.
Yeah,
a future Michael Myers.
But it's interesting too because in those days, a lot of times actors had to do their own stunts, or they tended to. And I mean, now it's so much CGI and stand-ins, and a lot of it was then too. But I mean, there's times that in this movie you absolutely have to have that be John Beck and James Caan, and that's who's doing it. And you think about like Norman Jewison coming on set of it, you're like, Please God, have no injuries to my major cast. I still need to get 2/3 of this. Like Roger Moore used to always say, like, they'd always do the dangerous scenes last so that if I died, everything else is in the can.
Well, apparently there was rumors for a while that someone died on set, but they didn't. But they did have a number of major injuries, including a couple that had to go to the hospital.
I imagine.
Well, famously in 1959 when William Wyler made Ben-Hur, one of the stuntmen got trampled by the horses. I don't think they show. That's not the one where the Stephen Boyd character gets trampled. But you watch that film made in 1959. I can't believe they created that set, let alone they did all that stunt work. And that's Heston and Boyd out there too, trading blows and whips and stuff. And sure, they sped up the film a little bit, but still them going around and around holding these chariots with horses. Like, what were we doing then? You can't believe that they got away with this stuff.
And that's what you have here. And speaking of injuries, in the final, the second last match in which they're battling Tokyo, which is where they get a lot of their injuries because Tokyo fights differently. And I kind of chuckled. I'm like, okay, this is 75. This is 70 because they talk about, Tokyo uses martial arts, and the one guy kept making jokes about how tall they were, but they end up being the most deadly team we see on camera that the Houston guys fight. But at one point, you can tell that the Tokyo folks were specifically told to take out Jonathan E. and his buddies, or at least his buddies. So Moon Pie ends up getting injured because he gets he gets mauled by like 4 guys. They take his helmet off and they just smack him in the back of the head, basically making him a vegetable. And we don't see the outcome of that match, but we hear that he wins through Jonathan E., who's visiting from the hospital. But what I thought was interesting, and I'm like, again, yet another example of this film 50 years ago, unfortunately, is still relevant today. And they make a little bit of a statement about the medical profession in here, because we have Moon Pie, who is basically essentially a vegetable. And Jonathan E's kind of trying to come with terms for it. He's like, well, is he actually dead? Is he actually brain dead? He keeps asking, and he's trying to ask the doctor questions, and all the doctor wants him to do is sign off on the body for organ. He's like, well, you got to sign it. And he's like, yeah, but can he sense it? Here, just sign it. Yeah, but I mean, basically,
we have rules.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but that it kind of makes sense though, because he's in. They went. I can't remember. They went to Tokyo, right?
Yeah, they're in Tokyo,
right?
So, yeah.
So they can't just leave the body of this, American athlete in the hospital and say, "Oh well, too bad, so sad." And Jonathan E was a representative of that outfit, for better or worse.
Yeah, I think Moon
so
Pie
that makes
had no
sense.
family. Also, I think they also said.
Right. Yeah, he had no family.
So
Jonathan E was the only.
So that doctor guy who was working in the hospital, as far as he knew, if Jonathan E turned around and like left, he would just be stuck there with this like random foreign body that he would have to take care of.
Well, and I get that, but at the same time, I think it was just the lack of empathy he was having for Jonathan E, this doctor. He's just like, here, just sign the paper so we can get the body out. He's like, yeah, but what about, wait, here, just sign this, get him out. And I just thought it was an interesting little scene that
it hammers home your point that Moon Pie is essentially supposed to be us in the audience. You're expendable. You're not Jonathan E. You're not the big star. You're second, but you don't matter.
Well, what's also interesting is that once he is returned, he's kept alive.
Yeah.
I mean, they put him. It's almost like the climax of the movie Dave, where Jonathan E goes and visits the vegetative, near death state of his friend, and he has this very interesting kind of conversation. It's like, you're pretty much a god now. You're going to be in this stasis state, but you'll still be alive, kept here forever. And I'm about to go off and probably meet my death. But it's like, what? That's a question. It's not something that I would consider a plot hole, but I'm just curious, why would Energy, the name of the giant corporation, keep Moon Pie alive? Unless they thought they could find some kind of a use for him in the future or whatever.
I think they saw Moon Pie as possibly maybe some angle to get control of Jonathan E if they needed to be. But also, though, makes me wonder what actually is the fate of Moon Pie. Because he wheels Moon Pie out, he goes to the helicopter, and there's these little like nuanced nods, like, to the pilot and it's almost like, are they going to dump his body somewhere?
Right, but that's before. I mean, that's right after the hospital scene where they sign off, right? The where he goes to visit.
No, that's after when he doesn't say, they're wheeling Moon Pie onto the helicopter to take him back to the States, supposedly, because we see the doctor trying to ask for the signature, and then we cut to Jonathan E walking next to Moon Pie, who's got the life support stuff on, and they're actually wheeling him on to the apparent energy corporate helicopter to take Moon Pie away. He doesn't actually sign off and have him dead. He gets put into the helicopter.
No, but I'm talking about the scene where he stops. The scene I'm talking about is he's not walking with him. He's actually in like a room with him.
Yeah,
right. That happens, and then after that, they wheel Moon Pie out to the helicopter. Rather than, we don't actually see Jonathan E sign the document. They wheel him out. They wheel Moon Pie out to the helicopter after that scene inside the room. But
I don't remember that.
Oh yeah, that's just the way it rolls. But then there's looks like, you make you wonder what will actually be the fate of Moon Pie once he's out of the range of Jonathan E.
Yeah.
And we got some folks here. Hey Talex, hey Stuffed Burrito, so glad you could join us from over in Twitchland. And yeah, Stuffed Burrito goes, Mark can't do a spoiler review of Rollerball remake because no one even wants to watch that. Guess what, Stuffed? We'll be watching it next week, so set your calendar. But as far as this one goes, yeah, the Moon Pie character was interesting. He gets injured, and then we get that final battle between New York and Houston, which is the deadliest one because bodies are dropping left and right. The corporation has said, yeah, okay, we gotta kill. We gotta have them
we'll
kill.
wipe out 2 teams to do it.
And they don't care. And that's the whole kind of scary angle, is that they see everybody as numbers. So, and the whole point is to try to kill Jonathan E. because Jonathan E. won't quit. He won't retire. They tried to do a big public announcement and he won't retire, which looked bad to the corporation. So they're like, what's left? Let's kill him. And they're like, well, what about the rest of the team members? Oh, well, our main goal is to kill Jonathan E. in that final game, because if he dies during the sport, no one will think anything. There won't be a revolution. Yeah, it was occupational hazard. And Jonathan E. just won't go down.
And I mean, they keep changing the rules.
Yeah,
to kind of ensure that he's going to get killed, or at least they think he's going to get killed. Because what they do with Tokyo, they made it no penalties.
Yeah.
With Tokyo, and then for the last match, there was no time limit. Yeah,
no penalties and no time limit, which also I feel like is a cheat. Like Ian says, because there's no time limit. What does it matter if Jonathan E scores the only point? Because the clock's not going to run out. It's not going to be done. It's a last man standing, basically. So you still got the one guy from New York alive. You still got Jonathan E alive. At some point, one of them has to die for this game to end.
Which during that match, they get very creative on how to take some guys out. We can't emphasize enough the stunt work in this movie, in this sci-fi film, because some of the ways these guys are getting taken out, you're looking at it going, oh, damn.
There's no gore, but there is some crunching that you hear as shots are taken on people.
Well, that one guy gets the ball to the head. That guy fell, and then they launched the ball, and he just gets the ball to the head. And what's interesting, it says the ring is sloped. The bodies just slide down to the middle then when they get injured or whatnot. And that whole final scene where it's the second last one, Tokyo, and why they're able to totally brutally beat the shit out of each other is because you've got no penalties and you've got limited substitutions, and then the final one on top of that is there's no limit, so it's basically to the death or last man standing. Someone injured enough they can't play is in that final match, because you get our scene where we get Jonathan E versus a motorcycle guy and a player and a skater. Which was again an interesting showdown, because they do this thing where they start the two bad guys, the New York guys, start approaching Jonathan, and he rolls to the other side of the ring, and so they do this thing for a while where they just kind of keep avoiding each other, and there's tension. And what's interesting too is the crowd is silent at that point. There's cheering going on until they realize there's 2 guys left, basically 3 guys, and suddenly the crowd is silent, and that just made it more eerie. I think is because suddenly this crowd was cheering and in the bloodlust, and then they're all of a sudden they're like, it's like the audience finally pieced together, oh, Jonathan E could die. This guy who they've been cheering and idolizing, they're like,
It didn't even go where I thought it was going to go, because he goes right up to John Houseman, right, and I'm like, okay, the motorcycle guy's going to come flying through, he's going to kill John Houseman. No, that's not what happened, thankfully, because I feel like that would have been that would have been a little bit too obvious, and I feel like that's what would probably happen now.
But he kills the guy in front of John Huston.
Yeah, right in front of him.
Jonathan E. The one guy launches off the back of the motorcycle, and he just crunches him right in front of Huston. It's like, oh man.
Yeah, I thought he was going to take, because they kind of foreshadow this in the beginning, or towards the beginning, where they've got the kind of the rookie players, and they're given the whole speech about like, here's how you play the game, here's some things to do, and keep yourself alive. And they actually drop the ball, and you hear it, you feel the force of this thing. I thought for sure that he was going to take Jonathan, he was going to take the ball and like smash it through Bartholomew's face or something like that instead of into the goal. That would have been fun. But no, I also like that as a villain, we don't get the panicked, crazy, I'm going to start taking hostages or something because it's not going my way. There's no big villain speeches. He's always in control, even to the point where he's not. And again, that's why I don't like how this movie is resolved. I feel like given that there was kind of genuine fear of an uprising in the final moments of this film, it would have been interesting to see some of that kind of register with Houseman, because you almost need the movie to go on to find out, okay, what's going to happen with his character, let alone Jonathan E. How is he going to resolve this?
Yeah, it's almost like he defies them for this match, but then what else is there where I think in these other movies, they're defeated even if they're not killed in a way, and that is almost being demanded here, I think, for it to have a little more of that kind of futuristic dystopian weight to it in a way that the films at that time were not trafficking in. They did not end happily. This one sort of did in a little bit more upbeat way, but I mean, you look at things like Parallax View and just some of the others that we mentioned, like Westworld and stuff like that. There's not, I mean, Richard Benjamin survives, but nobody else does, including the scientists who are all locked in the room and there's no air. And, all he looks back is remembers that this is supposed to be a vacation, and it wasn't much of one. But I love the fact too that this decade, made a lot of these kind of movies that were very much, kind of challenging and edgy and looking at the future and sort of making it a parallel for a lot of stuff that was going on. But I think it's interesting too, to your point, Ian, that, and I guess everybody's kind of been making it tonight, is that, not a lot seems to have changed that much. I mean, even early on when you talked about Trump going into the locker room and stuff like that, I'm just thinking about all of the stuff that Caitlin Clark is going through in the WNBA currently. She's missed 7 or 8 games in a row now because she's been injured, because all the other players are gunning for her because she's the number one player. And they don't like that. And they don't like her for a number of other reasons that we don't need to necessarily get into. But it's and the refs are not calling the fouls, and they're not calling them even when Caitlin Clark isn't in the game. And it's all because they want the audience, and somehow the controversy keeps it going. And, is that much different than some of the shit we're seeing here in Rollerball in this fictional movie? Not at all. So, it's fascinating that we're watching this and talking about today. And it's actually just as, in many respects, as relevant to today's world of corporations and sports and sort of the those who rule the world, and versus the celebrity. I mean, they did the same thing when Michael Jordan was the Jonathan E. of his time period, and a lot of times the players were gunning for him, trying to injure him because if they couldn't take him out with their talent, they'd take him out by cheap shots and some of that kind of stuff. And that's what's kind of fascinating about these things. They may be period pieces, but they seem entirely relevant today.
And that's what watching it again and revisiting it again was just so eerie for me, is because I'm watching this going, you polish this up a bit, you throw, this easily could be a script made today by some indie or whatnot. I mean, because I'm looking at it going, there are so many common themes in here. One of the things, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think the reason we have these kinds of movies coming out in the 70s is we had the kind of film, the independent filmmaker revolution that kind of happened around that time, because a studio movie 10 years prior to this, 1965, probably wouldn't have put out something like this. But what you ended up having is these these young, independent, and fierce filmmakers like Scorsese, Spielberg, all those guys all kind of come up. And it was the point where the studio system was dying. And,
Yeah.
And we'd also, I think, taken out some of the sacred cows too. I mean, as many people have said, when people saw the president killed in '63 and then his assassin, or potentially his assassin, snuffed out on live television, there was a certain amount of loss of innocence. And then, we went through Watergate and Vietnam and different other things, and, pollution and problems with civil rights and women's rights and other things like that. So there was, I think it was an edgy time too. But to your point, these filmmakers were smart enough to sort of capture the zeitgeist and sort of say, let's make films that are a little bit different, that don't have the conventional happy endings, that are, making commentaries on stuff. It was actually a great time, I think, for sci-fi in many respects.
Oh yeah, sci-fi was interesting.
I mean, it was also the death of the Hays Code helped bring this about, because if you look at specifically the Hays Code, wanted to get rid of a lot of the individuality of the William Wellman movies, who was coming out there and making movies with a very strong moral code. And they kind of wanted to just kind of wash all that away with the Hays Code and just kind of go rah, rah, wave the flag. And then the end of the Hays Code, you get all these filmmakers who are like, no, you know what? I like the social justice movies that were coming out in the early 30s before the Hays Code. Let's bring those back. And now we can actually do a lot of the things that 40 years prior they weren't allowed to do. So I think that's a big part of it. That's why I'm like the 70s filmmaker revolution was phenomenal for that.
I also think you can point. I'm just going to say quickly. Sorry, I just point is I think you can also point to the popularity of Rod Serling in the early '60s too. The Twilight Zone did a lot for futuristic stuff and commentary on the world we live in, and even sci-fi as a sort of conduit for that. And that, obviously was popular and affected, I think, filmmakers knowing that they can push the limits of some of that. And that was being done on television. And, Hitchcock, some of the stuff he did on TV was pretty edgy too. So it was all moving towards that, but we're benefiting it today, seeing it, looking back at these movies that are 40, 50 years old, and they don't seem that dated in so many regards, which is kind of wonderful.
Well, I feel like great filmmaking's never dated. A great story filmed in 1935, 1975, or 2025, it's always going to resonate if it's done well. And I think that one of the issues that we have now is back what we were having in the 60s, where everything is controlled by the major studios again, and they're kind of squashing the little guys when they do come up. Or, God, was it on this podcast a couple weeks ago? Or was it somewhere else where we were talking about how these the studios will pluck like a great filmmaker who made a great independent film and go, here's this Marvel movie we want you to make.
Yeah.
Was it here that we were talking about it?
Yeah, we've probably mentioned it. We may have mentioned it.
So I mean, so it's back to that again, and we need another like independent revolution.
Yeah.
Well, partially it's audience conditioning too, because you look at this year, you've had, I think, 2 great genre films coming out from a major studio, films that I think had kind of that independent spirit but big studio money. One is Companion, and the other is Sinners from Warner Brothers. But Sinners was a hit, but nobody saw Companion, and everyone should have seen Companion. That should have been a much bigger part of the film conversation this year.
I just saw it recently, and I've been telling everybody to check it out.
Fantastic.
Right. But it's, no one went to see it because it's a new thing. It's not connected to an IP that people are comfortable or familiar with. Right. I mean, again, it's not that long a shot from the world of Energy Corporation to what we're seeing right now with the domestic box office. But one thing I wanted to point out was something I thought was very interesting in this version of Rollerball. This is 1975. So, we're about a decade out from the civil rights movement. There's still a lot of, women's lib and all this other stuff as part of the national conversation. What we see here when Houseman's character is talking to the other executives of these companies all over the world, you've got, the stodgy old white guys, but you also have a woman and you also have a black guy who's the head, two of the most powerful people in the world are minorities who were just, trying to get a leg up in terms of modern society. Now, what's interesting is Star Trek, and to your point, Serling was doing a bit of this in the Twilight Zone in the 60s, but those were always very positive visions. Like, hey, look, just because someone has a different sex or race to you doesn't mean they're not, deserving of dignity and can do great things. You can have a black Starfleet captain 400 years from now. What you have here is, you have people of different races and sexes, and they can just be just as big as monsters as the white folks.
Yeah. They could just be just as corporate. Yeah, the corporate, money is one color green, and that's
right.
What you have
but
here.
that is kind of the ultimate message of equality. Whether this movie wants to realize it or not, it's almost patronizing to say, women and minorities, they can be, they can achieve great things too. You just have to give them a chance. That's one way of looking at it. The other way is they can achieve anything, including being evil, if given the right chance.
Well, it's also the way a corporation has kind of co-opted the movements by this point, because this is set 43 years in the future from when it was made, and it's we're gonna have them with us, but it's almost like the illusion of we're including them, because like you said, it's say it's 10 of them in a room, one of them's a woman, one of them's a black guy, the other 8 are all old white guys. It is kind of like they're the tokens, and they're we're going to show you how progressive we are, but we're all after the same thing. We're all still.
But I like too that you pointed out earlier, Ian, that there's a calm to it. Like, this is how it is now, and we kind of are used to getting our way, and we have this pretty well under control. And that's what I always thought was kind of scary about some of the other things that we've mentioned here too, is that there's always this calm, like that they've kind of got this under control. And even if they don't, a lot of times the bad guys in it don't act like they're crazy and flying off the handle. It's like, we're not used to losing.
Because we've taken this all.
Scary.
We've wargamed this all the way out to Plan Z if we need to.
Right? and I think that's the scariest part, is the underlying, because there's a lot of scary things underlying this surface of, you could just take this as, kind of a retelling sports ball type story with just, one against the celebrityism and that, but there's so much underneath the surface of Rollerball 75, including the idea that there's the scariest part is their lack of empathy. Like you said, they've got everything worked out, but even if not, even while people are dying on the tracks, they're just sitting there. They're just like, people around them, maybe their assistants or whatnot, are like, but the head corporation guys are like, yep, those guys dying.
But what's interesting about that too, Mark, is that it's almost like they've not only stopped being humans because they're just sort of the corporations, but they don't appreciate the bread and circuses that they're giving the masses.
Right.
Like, this isn't even entertaining for us really anymore. We do it for them, and we're interested in what it does for us corporate wise, and et cetera, et cetera. But as far as, are we really fans of the sport? Not so much, Everything is kind of meh when nothing really matters, because it's also idealized for you.
And I know we're going a little long, but there's one thing I wanted to mention, because for me, I watched it and I had to watch scenes a couple of times. Did you notice how many of the women looked very similar?
Oh, yeah.
In this, like the guys have all the women that you show up, they all look very similar in this. The dress, the makeup,
with square faces with great bone structure. Pamela Hensley, Maud Adams, I forget
Barbara Trentham.
Yeah, they had a similar quality. I don't know if that's the modeling of the era or whatever, but they definitely had a type.
Or maybe it's because you took away Maud Adams from him, so you're going to keep feeding him women that look like Maud Adams.
Yeah,
that might be
his type.
That might be
was Caleb's type in Ex Machina.
Yeah. I mean, it could be that. It could be they keep picking women similar to his first wife, which again is really odd, because he's with this woman. You realize, this isn't the relate, because he's literally with the one woman, and he throws in his tape for his wife, and he watches the tape of his wife, and it's broadcast through the whole house. And I'm like, wait, that's not your wife. She's in the house, and she's just like, oh yeah, here he goes again, pining for Ella.
Those are his memories. Those were where his memories were allowed to
And that was a great kind of poignant scene in the climax. Is he's there with his wife and he can have her as long as he takes the deal, but he decides, no, I'm just going to stand here with you standing in my living room and erase my memories of you on the TV.
Yeah. Yeah,
cold.
that was a hell of a scene where where he erases the tape, the one that he's been playing constantly. We've seen him, and just looks at, and the way he looks at her too, he's just like, she's like, take the deal, and he's like, eh.
She's also there to kind of explain for anybody who wasn't paying attention.
Yeah,
this game is gonna be till death. By the way, this is last man standing. Just in case you weren't entirely clear what it meant by there's no time limit. It's until everybody but one team is dead.
Which, again, I'm sorry to keep harping on this, that he should have been dead by then. This story, especially that last game, reminded me of the short story that introduced me to Kurt Vonnegut, which was Harrison Bergeron. And at the end of that, it is a very similar story. It takes place in a dystopian future where people are being essentially mind controlled into watching bread and circuses, and this guy breaks into a TV studio and basically tries to start the revolution, and he gets shotgunned to death, horribly killed, and people instantly forget that they'd seen anything because a TV signal is beamed into all their heads that makes them forget, like, oh, wait, what was that? What was that, honey? I think I was watching a commercial or something. I was kind of expecting that because I feel like the movie was building towards that. And then they have that rug pull. That did feel very modern. That felt like something I would watch in a modern remake of a classic movie where they have to just switch and fiddle with it. If I would change anything in a remake, it would be that ending. Now, I haven't seen the remake from 2002. I'll talk about that next week. But I can only imagine that it is not an eighth as edgy or imaginative or with as much to say as this film. And I'm fascinated to see a movie that takes the entire point out of Rollerball that's still called Rollerball.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting watch. And you're right. Would have been interesting, and if we did do a remake of this film and kept the screenplay up until those last moments, you easily could have had it to where the game was tie. He kills the last guy, but instead of throwing the ball, he drops the ball and walks out, and then have him with a scene like walking on the street or whatnot, and suddenly having a news report saying, oh, and after his last game ended in a tie, Jonathan E. has finally decided to retire. Even though he didn't make the announcement, have the corporation spin it to where, yeah, he's done with the game. He's, and here are your new members for the new Houston team next month, and have the world go on and just kind of negate anything that Jonathan E. had gone through during that game, and just have him sit there and on the street and barely people even recognize him and whatnot. You could have played an angle like that to where the corporation wins, because that's what, like you said, Ian, that's where it feels it leading up to that. No matter what Jonathan E. is going to do, these guys have thought of every angle. They've been through this enough, every angle.
And I think that's the kind of ending, especially in a modern version of a movie, where you have the audience walking out on this total down note, but wondering, could there have been room for a happy ending? If not, why not? What is this movie trying to say about us as the consumer of this? Am I upset about it? Why am I upset about it? Why am I not upset about it? Something that really make you think.
But also, I think, for lack of a better description, sometimes death is the best ending in a character's arc or a movie. And I think what's happened, and Joe said it, these young upstarts came up and got sort of control of their films. And it's funny how many people died in the 70s in movies. The ending was somebody died.
Yeah.
And it was dramatic and it was effective. I mean, it's kind of the same point about some of everybody's, people who love romances. The better romantic movies end with them not being together. Right. And I will come up with two for everyone. You can tell me where they do stay together and argue whether it's a classic or not. But in the 70s, characters died. Their arcs meant something. They were dramatic and meaningful. And I think starting with corporate America and the sort of corporate takeover of Hollywood and some of those kind of things, everything became franchisable. You know, they don't kill people now. In fact, it's fascinating that, you know, even though it's going to make money, and it's probably going to make its money back ultimately with DVD and VOD and all that kind of stuff sales, they're already saying, well, they think that the reason that the Fantastic Four didn't do as well in its second and third weekend is because people don't know these characters. And so that's the whole thing. Like, well, if we're going to do X-Men, we better bring back Wolverine, because everybody, even the dumbest executive at Hollywood who doesn't know anything about comic books, knows Wolverine, but he may not know Gambit. So we can't ever do a movie about Gambit. But here, you know, they were like, well, we're not trying to franchise Rollerball. I mean, you could easily see them, you know, Rollerball 2, Jonathan E's back, and he's but they said no, we're not. You know, even though this film didn't end quite right, they didn't do a sequel, and yet, you know, it reminds me. Can I just tell this real quick story, Mark? I don't want to take up too much of your time here, but it reminds me of. I may have told this before, but Kirk Douglas won the AFI Life Achievement Award, and when he went back 30 years ago, and when he got up there to do it, he had just been fired off of Rambo, and he told the story about how I came on to play Colonel Trask, and at the end of the movie, I killed Rambo because he's got to be taken out because he's of no use to society anymore. And then they decided they wanted to keep him alive for the sequels and all that, and I quit. So they redid the whole Colonel Trask scene, and they brought in Richard Crenna. They had to shoot all those over again because Kirk Douglas walked and said he wasn't going to redo it.
Yeah.
And at the end of his speech, again, Life Achievement, he goes, and the movie franchise went on to make X millions of dollars, but I was right. It was the movie was right to do it that way. They didn't do that way. They wanted to make, you know, glorious amounts of money, but artistically it wasn't right. And to your point, Joe, in the 70s, they seem to give these guys license to take out their main characters for the point of the drama.
Oh yeah, I mean, you had a lot of that. And Talix, thank you for telling unproductive to Lebo about his Streamboo to Scram. I appreciate that, Talix, quite a bit. And Stuffed Burrito
haunts all of us.
And Stuffed Burrito, shut your mouth. Neil Breen does not need to do an MCU film because he would cast himself as every superhero. It would be the X-Men, but Neil Breen would be looking like every X-Men with his B-roll footage he got from Pond 5. But anyway, a couple of things interesting about 1975 is while Rollerball may not have made it, you know, very well popular-wise or award-wise, Oscar-wise, it did get the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror's attention. Now, check this out. We've talked about these other films on the podcast. James Caan won Best Actor, tied with Don Johnson from A Boy and His Dog.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
They won Best Actor from the science fiction, fantasy, and horror films. Catherine Ross won Best Actress for The Stepford Wives.
Yeah.
Jaws won for Best Advertising. Rollerball won for, out of all the genre films, Best Cinematography, which I believe it deserves because the camera work in this film was crazy. Mel Brooks won for Best Director of Young Frankenstein, which also won Best Horror Film that year, which it went up against Black Christmas, Bug, Paradise, Phantom of the Paradise, Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Old Dracula. That's what Young Frankenstein went up with.
Jaws was not in there.
Jaws Best Advertising, but it was not for Best Horror Film.
That not sweep them unless it was the year before or something. That's weird.
Yeah,
By the way, I'll give you a big kudos if anybody can tell me who narrated the commercials for Jaws. He's a famous actor back then, and then he became a voiceover talent.
Jaws did win Outstanding Film of 1975 overall.
Okay, there we go.
It won
for
overall.
Not win something. Come on, but Percy Rodriguez. Do you remember that actor? Percy Rodriguez. He was this actor, and he did all these. He was the guy who narrated. It's out there. It's in the dark. It's hungry, and it's hungry.
He was the Mr. Voice of the 70s, wasn't he?
He was the guy who said, you know, what was the restaurant that had Dem Bones? Do you remember that one? Dem Bones.
No, I don't remember offhand.
One of those like heavy with meat. It was like, yeah, he made so much money as a voiceover. There's a number of really good actors who just transitioned into voiceover talent and made millions. Never
Well,
seen again.
we do have Talek sit here. The ad for Jaws 19 is great.
Oh no!
That was called Meg 2, I think. Talix was Jaws 19. Anyway, I just thought
really big shot at that.
I just thought 70
Jason Statham.
I just thought it was interesting, just looking real quick at the sci-fi awards, that there were the other films we've talked about, Boy and His Dog and Stepford Wives and Young Frankenstein. So, and then Dark Star, which I'm sorry, Dark Star, I don't get the appeal. There's so many people who really praise Dark Star, John Carpenter's first college film. I used to use that as a litmus test to see if my friends would still like me after I showed Dark Star, because I've watched it many times, and it's one of those films that I just it doesn't click with me.
It was
and
also
I've tried.
Bannon and Brian Norrell, right? I think they were all involved.
It's with the tomato, the inflatable ball with feet is one of the aliens, and he talks to his frozen captain, and you get the guy at the end on the surfboard traveling with the Phoenix cluster. They're taking me away. I don't get that film, and I wish I did. Because I know so many people who love that movie. And Ian, mad props to you, because I've watched it many times. And I can't.
You like Eraserhead, Mark?
Eraserhead? Yeah, I like Eraserhead. But yeah, I don't know why Dark Star doesn't hit with me, but it's been a long time since I've watched it. But in any case, we've gone way over, but this film deserves it. Rollerball is a very interesting film. And I think the whole panel will agree in here. You should seek it out because it's still relevant.
It's free on YouTube.
It's still relevant today. It is scary how many themes in this, and that's what shows you that's good sci-fi. Actually, if science fiction, if you can read it and go, holy shit, this can be applied to things today, and it was something that was written 50, 60, 70 years, you go like, huh. And it also is a sad statement on society if it still applies to things today.
You learn nothing.
So
Rod Serling told us all in 62, and we've learned nothing.
I find myself saying that a lot watching futuristic movies. I'm like, yeah, 50 years ago, 50, 60, 80 years ago, they told us this was going to be a problem, and it's still a problem.
We were warned.
We learned nothing. I mentioned movies from the 30s, and last year when we were doing the pre-code movies, be like, yeah, you notice watching these movies, we still have the same problems 90 years later. Like they never get solved.
It's just that human nature. So I think my panel at Talix, it was holographic, was the ad for Jaws 19. I love that one. This time it's really, 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 really personal. Back to the Future 2.
Goes, the shark still looks fake.
The shark still looks fake. But this is an Over the Hill episode, so we'll wrap things up tonight with choosing the Wheel of Random. And we will see what category we hit next week. Hold on one moment. We got to get rid of all legs. All legs is gone. We don't have an all legs in here. So the last ones we have are Totally Committed, Rockin' World, Captivated Audience, and Carradine Carnage. So let's spin the wheel of random and see
2000, Kill
where
Bill.
It leads to and there we have it, folks. It's going to be Carradine Carnage. Now, what is Carradine Carnage, you may ask? Well, let me tell you here. Carradine Carnage is going to be Death Race 2000. That will be our Over the Hill. That will be our Over the Hill episode, which will be from 1975, Death Race 2000. Then we're going to have Boxcar Bertha. We're going to do Q the Winged Serpent and Death Sport. So those
Q the Winged Serpent?
Yes.
Yeah, David Carradine's the lead alongside
Michael Moriarty.
Moriarty, yeah. So we're doing all David Carradine.
Jesus.
So we will be doing
broaden it to other Carradines there.
No, not this time.
That's what I thought we were gonna do.
He's got a dad, he's got a couple of brothers.
That's for another time. Okay, we're doing these. The Though I might trade up Death Sport for Warlords. It depends on what can I
That
find.
Kill Bill?
No, I have Warlords if you need it.
Okay.
Oh, so we'll get
No,
some
I would.
Fredo and Ray.
Everybody
Fredo and
talks.
Ray.
Everybody talks about Kill Bill, Jeff. We try to pick films that people don't necessarily talk about on the spoiler room.
You don't want to talk about Kung Fu? Or no, just
that's a whole show that you could spend a lot of time on Kung Fu, though I watched it quite a bit because I enjoyed that film quite a bit. But yes, Carradine Carnage for September. So we will be looking for films.
which is so funny because he was such a he was kind of this calm man, who of course had to Kung Fu everybody, but then he's getting in all these ultra-violent movies.
Yeah, and that's what we'll take a look at. So look forward to that, folks. That should be some fun conversations in there, especially revisiting Death Race 2000, because I've watched that film a number of times over the years. But enough of me yapping. This is where I give my wonderful crew members their license to shill. And so, Jeff, tonight, you get to go first, sir. Please, the floor is yours.
Oh, my goodness. You can read my reviews at theestablishingshot.org. I also write essays about the movie and showbiz industries for pipelineartist.com, a magazine online about the arts. I'm Jeff York, Chicago, on TikTok, where I do 1-minute movie reviews that incorporate some of my caricatures. And I'm also Jeff York, Chicago, and Jeff York Caricatures on Instagram. So if you're not looking for me, you're not trying. Just Google me and it'll tell you everywhere I'm that.
He's everywhere.
I'm not on Tinder or any of the dating apps yet, though maybe one of these days as a single man I should be. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I'm a married guy, so I
can't say, I've been watching you for months, Jeff. I'd like to meet you. And then she turns into Alex.
Well, yeah, and then you'll be just like, no, I'm sorry. I've watched a number of De Palma films. We aren't meeting. Sorry.
And then she puts on that great DiNaggio music and says, don't you want to kiss me? And this swirling camera will spin around us like I'm Deborah Shelton and Craig Wasson.
You'll be fine until they put on the gloves, and then you're gonna have to I gotta leave now. Sorry, those black gloves are the deal breaker.
Watch it when you're showering.
Joe, do you got anything to pitch, sir?
Yes, but it's going to go to specialmarkproductions.com/Animation Nation. And the reason I bring this up is we're doing Carradine Carnage, and I have been pushing people to go vote for Evil Tunes because David Carradine is in that. He hangs himself in the beginning of the movie.
Oh, no.
And the jokes just write themselves.
Jesus. Wow. Is it a snuff film?
No, it's not a stuff. It's animated. Evil Tunes is animated. Well, live action animated.
It's basically a filthy Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
When you think of it's partly animated, partly live action. B movie by Fred Olin Ray. It's absolutely fun.
Yeah. So well,
thanks for reminding me by getting us a month full of David Carradine movies.
It got dark in here real quick, but go to specialmarkproductions.com/
those shows. You're going to have a couple of belts to get through them.
/ Animation Nation. Please put your vote in. It's anonymous, but we do the count.
That was an Ian joke. Come on, man.
That was. We got one more. Well, to go along with this line of jokes, Talix says, "Is the Carradine Carnage self-inflicted?" Apparently so, because I spun the wheel of random, and so it is self-inflicted. We'll be covering Carradine films.
And here in the spoiler room, we will never leave you hanging.
Oh.
Hey, Ian! License to shill is yours.
And unlike Rollerballs, that Ian did not like, the climax of those movies will be very interesting.
Well, we can rule out any Carradines ever doing an interview with us.
Sorry to step on you, Ian.
Ian, what do you got to show?
I follow any of that. Ian Simmons, Kicking the Seat. You can find me at kickseat.com and also right here on YouTube and also the Spoiler Room and Special Mark Productions every Sunday night now, talking about movies live. And I'm excited because a number of those films are going to be blind spots for me, much like Rollerball was tonight. Particularly Death Race 2000. I've never seen it, and I'm excited to watch it, see what all the hype's about.
It's definitely going to be a
great dystopian futuristic movie. So yes,
I saw a couple of those at the drive-in myself, Joe.
Awesome.
was a young
Oh, that's
I've
fantastic.
never
And
been
I
to a
were
drive-in,
young
and
and
I gotta
clothes.
scratch that at some point.
So there you go, folks. Check out all my wonderful panels stuff. And then if you're bored, you can head over to specialmarkproductions.com. But please go to specialmarkproductions.com/animation nation. That's our special for our 20th anniversary, which will be next year on YouTube. I just don't know when to quit. So thank you so much to all my live viewers, Talix, Stuffed Burrito, the Twitch crew over there. Please check out Twitch and check out Stuffed Burrito Entertainment and Talix channels. And yeah, thank you for listening, folks. Hope you enjoyed this extended episode. And until next time, we'll just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.